Have you ever wondered why the very thing you fear seems to show up faster than the thing you desire? You dream of abundance, yet bills pile up. You long for love, yet loneliness lingers. It feels unfair, like fear is stronger than faith. But Neville Goddard's teachings reveal a startling truth. Imagination is neutral, and what you feel most deeply is what life mirrors back. That's why manifesting fear often outruns manifesting desire. The good news? The same law that brings lack alive can be redirected to make fulfillment inevitable. And once you understand this paradox, you'll never look at your fears or your desires the same way again. Desire begins like a spark in the dark, tiny but alive with potential. Everyone has felt it, the sudden rush of imagining more, wanting more, sensing there is something waiting to be claimed. Yet, right behind that spark, almost as if lurking in the shadows, comes fear. Fear whispers, "What if it doesn't happen?" That whisper, when believed, takes on more weight than the spark itself. Neville Goddard often reminded us that feeling is the secret. Desire by itself is just the seed. It carries the idea of creation, yes, but it needs the soil of belief. The soil can either be rich with faith or poisoned with fear. When someone dwells on what's missing, that is the state they are truly living in, even if their lips say otherwise. Think of it like planting two seeds in your inner world, one of desire, one of fear. Which one grows faster? The one you water with attention. Most people don't realize how much they feed fear by replaying doubts, conversations of lack, or worst-case scenarios in imagination. The law of assumption doesn't care which seed you nurture. It just mirrors it back. A man once told me he desired financial freedom, but every night as he fell asleep, he rehearsed unpaid bills in his mind. Guess what hardened into fact? Not the dream of freedom, but the reality of lack. That's the subtle but brutal difference between manifesting desire and manifesting fear. Both are active, but only one serves you. Our culture often praises desire. Dream boards, vision lists, set your goals. And while these are useful, they mean nothing if fear is the state you return to. Desire must be more than a passing wish. It must clothe itself with conviction. Otherwise, fear runs faster, outpacing desire, shaping your reality before you even notice. Have you ever noticed how quickly negative thoughts spiral compared to hopeful ones? A single worry can keep someone awake for hours, while a dream of abundance might get dismissed in seconds. That's because fear hooks into survival instincts. It feels urgent. Yet this urgency is an illusion. What you dwell on emotionally is what eventually crystallizes. Imagine someone walking a tightrope. Desire is the vision of reaching the other side, but fear is the shaking legs, the sweaty palms, the thought, "I might fall." Which state dominates determines whether the rope feels impossible or natural. In life, it's no different. The state you dwell in becomes the ground beneath your feet. Desire is creative, yes, but only if it's nurtured as already real. When left as someday, it invites fear to step in and declare, "Not today, not ever." To live in the end, as Neville taught, is to stop treating desire like a wish and start treating it like memory. A memory is lived, not doubted. That shift changes everything. People often ask, why do my fears manifest faster than my hopes? The truth is, they don't. It just feels that way because fear is lived with more consistency, more conviction. Desire that is treated as longing remains weak, while fear dressed as certainty appears strong. The law of assumption doesn't choose sides. It only reflects states. And so the real question becomes, which voice will you amplify? The creative spark of desire or the heavy echo of fear? Whichever you choose, imagination will obey. But here's the twist. Even fear is proof of your power. Because if fear can shape reality so quickly, imagine what happens when desire is felt as already done. And that's where Neville's deeper teaching begins. One of the hardest truths for people to accept is that the law of assumption is neutral. It doesn't punish, it doesn't reward, it simply mirrors. Neville Goddard explained this countless times. Imagination creates reality, and it doesn't matter if imagination is clothed in radiant faith or wrapped in trembling fear, the law responds just the same. Think about electricity. You can use it to light a home or burn it down. The power itself isn't moral, it's obedient. Conscious creation works the same way. When someone assumes lack, life reflects lack. When someone assumes fulfillment, life echoes fulfillment. The law doesn't decide for you, you decide, and the mirror responds. Many people resist this because it means taking full responsibility for their inner world. It's easier to say, life is unfair, or God didn't want me to have it. But Neville Goddard teachings point in another direction. The inner world is the cause. The outer world is the effect. Your assumption, not fate, carries the power. Consider a child who believes monsters live under the bed. Their imagination produces fear so real it keeps them awake. To the law, there's no difference between that child's terror and an adult fearing bankruptcy. Both are assumptions dressed in emotion, and both shape the experience of life until the assumption shifts. This is why some people find themselves manifesting lack repeatedly. They think, I want more money, but their inner dialogue is, I never have enough. That inner contradiction isn't judged by the law. It's simply mirrored. Reality faithfully reveals the state most consistently lived in, whether that's fear of lack or certainty of abundance. Imagine you're watching a movie projector. The reel playing inside determines the images on the screen outside. If the film is scratched, the screen looks scratched. If the film is whole, the screen is clear. The projector doesn't care what film it's fed. It just plays it. Your imagination works exactly like that. And here's the beauty. Once you realize imagination is the creative center, you stop blaming circumstances. You start to see that your assumptions, chosen daily, hold more weight than statistics, news, or opinions. That's the moment of spiritual awakening, the recognition that the outer world is an echo, not a dictator. Some people argue, but I didn't choose to imagine my worst fears. Yet pause and notice, how many times have you rehearsed those fears? How many times have you accepted them as just the way things are? That unconscious rehearsal is assumption in action. And the law of assumption doesn't need your permission, it just obeys. The challenge, then, isn't whether the law works. That always works. The challenge is whether you will consciously feed it faith or unconsciously feed it fear. And that choice happens not in dramatic rituals, but in the quiet moments, before sleep, during daydreams, in idle conversations with yourself. Once you grasp that imagination creates reality, neutrality stops feeling scary and starts feeling liberating. Because if fear has been given so much power, then what could happen when faith becomes your assumption? The mirror never lies, it only reflects, which means the next reflection is yours to decide. Fear is sneaky. It disguises itself as being realistic, as planning ahead, or as just preparing for the worst. But Neville Goddard would say, whatever you give your attention to with feeling, you consent to. And when fear of lack is what dominates the inner world, that lack gets fed like a hungry animal at your doorstep. Imagine someone constantly checking their bank account, rehearsing every bill, every deadline. On the surface, they're just being responsible. But inwardly, they are assuming lack, living in the end of shortage and repeating it daily. The law of assumption has no choice but to reflect that state back as outer fact. Have you noticed how worry seems to work faster than hope? That's because fear is felt with stronger intensity. When someone lies awake imagining failure, their emotions are alive, their body reacts, their heart races. In that moment, they are assuming lack with deep conviction, and the law mirrors it faithfully. It's almost unfair how fear steals the stage so quickly. One hopeful thought about abundance can feel fragile, while one fearful thought about bills feels heavy and urgent. The truth is, both are seeds, but the one nourished with repetition grows quicker. That's why worry manifests before hope. It's rehearsed with more consistency. Think about gossip. A rumor spreads faster than good news because it hooks into emotion. Fear of lack works the same way. It spreads through the mind, replaying conversations like, I can't afford that, or money doesn't grow on trees. And because those phrases are repeated with belief, they carry weight in the imagination. Neville Goddard teachings remind us that the inner dialogue is the key. When your inner conversations circle around bills, scarcity, or fear of losing, you are giving life to those states. And the longer you dwell there, the more natural they feel, until you forget they were assumptions in the first place. But here's the paradox. Fear is not proof that you're powerless. It's proof that your imagination is powerful. If fear can create such vivid experiences, then the same mechanism redirected can create freedom. The law of assumption doesn't care if the scene is dark or bright. It simply obeys. I once knew someone who always said, I'm broke, but at least I'm honest about it. That honesty wasn't harmless, it was an assumption spoken into life. Their reality never shifted because they never stopped rehearsing lack with conviction. Their honesty was just fear disguised as truth. And so worry isn't a passive thing. It's active creation disguised. It feels like preparation, but it's really planting seeds in the inner world that sprout into outer conditions. The law of assumption makes no exceptions. What you fear with feeling, you eventually meet in fact, which means the next step is not to fight fear, but to notice how much energy it consumes. If fear of lack can move mountains, imagine what happens when desire is assumed as fulfilled. The question is, will you keep watering the weeds of fear or start planting faith on purpose? Most people confuse desire with manifestation itself. They think the wanting is already creating, but Neville Goddard was clear. Desire is only the beginning. It's a signal, a spark, a pointer. Desire says, this is what I want. But if you leave it there, as longing, the state being assumed is not fulfillment, it's absence. Picture someone staring through a bakery window at a cake. Their desire is real. They can almost taste it. But the longer they stand outside only looking, the stronger the feeling of separation becomes. That is the trap of desire without fulfillment. It intensifies lack instead of dissolving it. Neville Goddard teachings emphasize, assume the wish fulfilled. This is not daydreaming about someday. It's stepping into the state of already having. It's living in the end, letting the desire clothe itself in naturalness until it feels like memory rather than wish. That's when creation begins to solidify. The mistake many make is nurturing desire as if it were a badge of spirituality. I want to manifest this, I want to manifest that. But endless wanting only proves one thing: you're living in desire, not in fulfillment. Longing has energy, yes, but it's the energy of incompleteness. Think about relationships. Someone who constantly says, I want love, usually feels the ache of loneliness more than the joy of union. The feeling behind the desire reveals the true assumption. Are you imagining togetherness or rehearsing the pain of not having? The law of assumption reflects the latter if that's what dominates. Imagine a child on Christmas Eve. Their desire is pure, but their belief is even stronger. They don't just want presents. They know presents are already theirs. They're wrapped under the tree. That child sleeps in fulfillment, not longing. That's the secret adults forget. Desire must graduate into expectancy. And expectancy is not frantic. It's calm, settled, almost casual. Neville used to say, it is not what you want that you attract. You attract what you believe you already have. So the work isn't in holding desire tightly, but in loosening it enough to feel it as normal, as done, as lived. Many spiritual seekers exhaust themselves chasing desires, mistaking the chase for progress. But chasing keeps the goal at a distance. Manifestation truth lies in embodiment, wearing the state as if it were already yours. The moment desire feels complete, it begins to project itself outward. This doesn't mean desire is wrong, it's sacred. Desire is the signal that life wants to express through you, but left unclothed, it withers. It's like having a script with no actors. To move from script to stage, you must enter the role, feel it, walk in it, own it as now. So the real question is, are you feeding the state of longing or the state of fulfillment? Both begin with desire, but only one transforms imagination into fact. And this is where the practice shifts, from asking to assuming, from waiting to living in the end. The next step is how you choose to imagine. Neville Goddard often said, dare to assume. But assume what? Not the process, not the waiting, not the halfway point. Assume the end. To imagine the middle is to stay in longing. To imagine the end is to step into fulfillment. The end is where you already are the person who has, not the one still asking. Let's take a simple example. If your desire is a new home, don't imagine yourself signing papers or begging the bank. That scene still implies uncertainty. Instead, imagine yourself cooking dinner in that kitchen or hearing the laughter of loved ones echoing through the walls. That is imagining the end. Why does this matter? Because the law of assumption is literal. If you picture yourself waiting, you are assuming waiting. If you picture yourself struggling, you are assuming struggle. The state you dwell in becomes your reality. Choosing the end bypasses the struggle and anchors you in completion. Think about learning to drive. You didn't imagine fumbling forever. You imagined yourself already on the road, confident. That end picture pulled you forward until your body caught up. Manifestation works the same way. Imagination creates reality, so choose the scene that implies it's already done. One woman I knew always desired marriage, but every night she imagined waiting at the altar, alone, with no groom. Her romantic imagination was actually feeding lack. Once she shifted and began imagining herself already wearing a wedding band, laughing with her husband over breakfast, everything changed. Within a year, she was married. The power of assumption lies in subtlety. The most effective imaginal acts are ordinary, not grandiose. Neville Goddard teachings stress this. Choose a simple scene that implies fulfillment. Shake hands with a friend who congratulates you. Open your wallet and see it full. Sleep in the bed of your new home. Ordinary scenes, extraordinary results. Notice how this frees you from pressure. You don't have to figure out how it will happen. You don't have to chase steps or control circumstances. By assuming the end, you plant yourself in the state of already done. The outer world adjusts itself, sometimes through ways you'd never imagine. Fear, of course, will try to drag you back to the middle. But what about the money? But what about the process? This is where discipline of mind comes in. You gently redirect. No, I'm already there. That repetition trains the inner world until the end feels more natural than the lack. Imagine the difference between staring at a locked door versus walking through it. One implies waiting, the other implies arrival. When you choose the end, you walk through the door in imagination first. And as Neville said, what you consent to inwardly hardens into fact outwardly. So what scene could you create right now that implies your desire is already normal? Don't choose something flashy. Choose something real, lived, ordinary. Because when it feels ordinary inside, it soon becomes ordinary outside. And that leads to the next key, the feeling that seals the state. Neville Goddard always said, feeling is the secret. Why? Because thought without feeling is like a seed thrown on concrete. It has no soil to take root. It's the emotional charge that gives life to imagination. And between fear and desire, whichever carries stronger feeling tips the scale of manifestation. Think about it. Fear often wins because it feels urgent. Your body reacts, your heart races, your stomach tightens. That intensity makes the state real. But the same principle works in your favor when you choose gratitude, relief, or joy. These feelings plant you firmly in fulfillment, even before the outer proof appears. Gratitude is powerful because it assumes possession. You don't thank someone for what you might get. You thank them for what's already yours. When you close your eyes and say, "Thank you," from the depth of your being, you're stepping into the state of the wish fulfilled. That gratitude carries more weight than fear ever could. Relief is another key. Think of the moment you finally paid off a debt or received news you were waiting for. The exhale, the dropping of shoulders, that's relief. In imagination, you can create that same bodily shift. By rehearsing relief, you signal to your subconscious, it is done. Quiet joy doesn't scream, it doesn't beg, it smiles inwardly, calmly, as if the thing desired has been woven into normal life. Neville's students used to describe it as a soft happiness, like the satisfaction of sitting by a fire on a cold night. That feeling, replayed consistently, hardens into fact. Fear may feel louder, but it's brittle. Gratitude and joy, though subtle, are steady. One anxious thought might shake you for a moment, but when you build the habit of feeling fulfillment, you always return to center. Like a compass, your heart points back to the state of having, not the state of lack. Try this. Tonight before sleep, imagine your desire already yours. Don't beg. Breathe. Feel the relief of done. Let gratitude wash over you like warm water. That state, carried into sleep, is infinitely more creative than 1,000 anxious thoughts carried into the night. Neville called this the art of living in the end. It's not about constant effort, but about repeated immersion in feeling. Each time you step into fulfillment emotionally, you carve a groove in your subconscious. Soon, it becomes your default. And when that happens, outer reality must follow. Notice the paradox. You don't have to wait for proof to feel relief. You feel relief first and proof appears after. You don't need evidence to feel joy. You let joy become the evidence within. This reversal is what makes conscious creation so powerful and so counterintuitive. So, if fear is tipping the scale in your life, pause, breathe, shift. What if you treated your desire as done, just for this moment? Gratitude doesn't argue. Relief doesn't beg. Joy doesn't chase. They simply assume. And once you feel that, the next step is learning what to do when fear inevitably knocks again. Fear has a way of sneaking back in, doesn't it? You might feel solid in faith one moment, then suddenly your mind is flooded with doubts. Neville Goddard never said fear would vanish completely. He said what matters is what you consent to. Consent means agreement, and in imagination, agreement is creation. Most people try to wrestle fear into silence. They argue with it, push against it or drown in frustration, but fighting fear is still giving it attention. The better path? Gently redirect. Like guiding a child away from a dangerous road, you don't scold. You simply steer the mind back toward the end you've chosen. Imagine fear as a radio station. When you tune in, you hear static, bad news, endless what-ifs. Fighting with the static doesn't change the channel. You simply need to turn the dial. And the dial in Neville's teachings is imagination. Redirect to the station that plays your fulfilled state. Think of a time when a negative thought tried to spiral you downward. Maybe you feared losing your job or a relationship. The moment you consented, yes, that might happen, you gave it life. But the moment you caught yourself and thought, no, this is not my state, I already am secure, you flipped the script. That choice is everything. The law of assumption doesn't punish the occasional fearful thought. It responds to the state you return to consistently. Just as a boat can drift slightly off course but still reach its destination, you can redirect again and again without losing the journey. Consistency matters more than perfection. Fear thrives on urgency, on making you feel like you must react immediately. But when you pause, breathe, and remember, feeling is the secret. You rob fear of its power. You remind yourself that imagination creates reality, not anxiety. That pause is a silent act of rebellion against the old state. Neville often compared imagination to a stage. You are the director. If fear walks in as an actor, you don't have to give it the lead role. You can thank it, dismiss it, and bring in gratitude, relief, or joy instead. The scene that dominates rehearsal becomes the one that opens on life's stage. Try this exercise. When fear arises, instead of denying it, acknowledge it softly. I see you. Then pivot. Immediately imagine the opposite, even if only for a moment. Each pivot is like turning your car back toward the road after a swerve. You don't curse the swerve, you correct it. Over time, this gentle redirection builds strength. You stop fearing fear itself. It becomes just another signal, reminding you to return to your chosen state. And as you master this, you notice fear visits less often. And when it does, it passes quicker, like a cloud drifting across the sun. So the invitation isn't to fight fear, but to master redirection. Remember, what you consent to inwardly hardens into fact outwardly. Fear only wins if you let it. The power is always in your agreement. And once fear loses its grip, something remarkable begins to appear in your daily life. Subtle signs of freedom, synchronicities, and soft shifts in reaction. One of the first signs you've shifted states isn't something dramatic. It's subtle. Your reactions soften. The same old triggers, the ones that used to set off panic, now meet a quieter response. Instead of spiraling, you breathe. That shift may feel small, but it's proof that the law of assumption is working from the inside out. Neville Goddard said that when imagination creates reality, the world reshapes itself gently, naturally. You begin to notice synchronicities, small alignments that make you smile. A conversation overheard, an unexpected call, a book falling into your hands at the right moment. These are not coincidences, they're echoes of your new state. Think of it like tuning a guitar. At first, every string feels tense, discordant, but as you adjust, the sound aligns, and suddenly the melody flows. When you shift into the fulfilled state, life begins to hum with synchronicities. It feels less like effort, more like harmony. Another sign is the fading of urgency. In the old state, desire feels desperate, like gasping for air. But once you assume the wish fulfilled, the desperation dissolves. You don't need it to happen this second. You expect it, like waiting for the sun to rise. That calm expectancy is the fruit of inner alignment. Have you ever noticed how people treat you differently without you saying a word? That's another sign. The state you carry silently begins to project itself outward. A person who once ignored you suddenly treats you with warmth. Opportunities arrive where doors were once shut. Nothing outside changed. Your state did. A woman once told me that after practicing Neville's teachings, she stopped obsessing over money. Instead of checking her bank account 10 times a day, she relaxed. Within weeks, clients began reaching out to her without her chasing them. That calm expectancy was the magnet, not the worry. Another subtle marker is peace in the in-between. Before, waiting felt like torture. Now it feels like gestation. Something alive is forming. You stop counting days, stop checking signs, and simply know. This knowing is expectancy. It's not loud, it's not dramatic. It's steady, like a heartbeat. And this expectancy isn't blind hope. It's grounded in the manifestation truth Neville shared. Imagination creates reality. You've rehearsed the end enough times that it feels real inside, and once it feels real inwardly, outer confirmation becomes a matter of time, not possibility. It's almost humorous, in fact, how light everything feels. Fear once felt like an iron chain. Now it's more like a breeze you notice but don't obey. Life carries a sense of flow, and even challenges are met with curiosity rather than dread. That's the quiet power of embodiment. These signs are not the end of the journey. They're the beginning of living from a new state. Softened reactions, synchronicities, expectancy, all show you've stepped onto a different path, and the more you walk it, the more natural it feels. Next comes the deeper embodiment, where fear no longer controls the pace at all. Embodiment is the stage where the teachings of Neville Goddard stop being theory and become lived truth. It's no longer about repeating affirmations desperately. It's about being. You live as the one who already has, even if appearances scream the opposite. Fear may whisper, but it no longer sets the rhythm of your life. Think of an actor fully immersed in a role. They don't keep reminding themselves, "I am this character." They simply are. Embodiment works the same way. You stop rehearsing lack or begging for desire. You start breathing as the fulfilled self. It becomes natural, not forced. The difference between practice and embodiment is subtle but profound. Practice feels like effort, catching thoughts, redirecting, affirming. Embodiment feels effortless, like muscle memory. You walk, talk, and react differently without trying. The new state has taken root in your subconscious. A man once shared how he desired a better job. At first he used affirmations and imaginal scenes, but one day, without even realizing it, he stopped worrying about interviews. He began to carry himself like someone already successful. Within months, his outer world matched the inner shift. That's embodiment. Fear doesn't vanish in embodiment, it simply loses its power. It's like background noise in a cafe. You notice it, but it doesn't disturb your conversation. Fear might knock, but it no longer rushes you into frantic decisions. You live at your own pace, anchored in fulfillment. Neville Goddard teachings emphasize this freedom. Once you live in the end, the journey stops feeling like striving. Outer circumstances may still shuffle, but you no longer treat them as final. You know they're shadows of past states, not rulers of your destiny. Imagine a marathon runner who no longer checks the clock obsessively. They run in flow, trusting their training. That's what embodiment feels like. You're no longer in a hurry because the finish line is already secured in imagination. The body just enjoys the run. Another sign of embodiment is ease in conversation. You stop talking like someone chasing. Instead of saying, "I hope someday," you naturally say things like, "when this happens," or as if it's already true. The shift shows up in language, tone, and even posture. And embodiment doesn't just affect one area, it spreads. The confidence you feel in one assumption begins to color others. You realize, if I can live as fulfilled here, I can do it anywhere. That's when conscious creation becomes a lifestyle, not just a practice. Living as the fulfilled self is not about ignoring reality. It's about redefining it. Fear no longer rushes you. Appearances no longer deceive you. You walk through life clothed in the end, steady and calm. And when you live this way, desire finally creates, not as longing but clothed in faith. Which brings us to the final step. Desire by itself is a whisper. It signals what could be, but without faith it fades into longing. Neville Goddard made it clear. Desire becomes creation only when it's clothed in the assumption of fulfillment. Faith is that clothing. It transforms a fragile wish into a living reality inside you. Faith doesn't mean forcing belief. It means wearing the state so naturally that fear has nothing left to feed on. Imagine planting a seed and covering it with rich soil. You don't dig it up every day to see if it's growing. You trust the process. That quiet trust is faith in action. When you step into the end, you're not pretending. You're choosing to live from the truth of your inner world. Imagination creates reality, and what you consent to inwardly hardens into fact outwardly. The more you return to the state of fulfillment, the more the old state withers. Think of fear as a parasite. It only survives when you feed it with attention. The moment you clothe desire with faith, fear begins to starve. It may scratch at the door, but it can't dominate. Your chosen reality quietly expands until it becomes the only story left standing. A woman once told me she desired healing. For months, she lived in longing, constantly checking symptoms. Then she shifted. She began to imagine herself already whole, walking, laughing, living freely. Within time, her body reflected the assumption. Desire clothed in faith birthed her healing. The law of assumption is impartial. It doesn't care whether you feed fear or feed faith, but faith carries a different energy. It's restful, steady, creative. Living in the end, you stop begging and start embodying. You stop wishing and start remembering. That's when manifestation truth reveals itself. Gratitude, relief, joy. These are the garments of faith. They are signs you've stepped into fulfillment. And the more you wear them, the less you even think about the desire. It becomes natural, ordinary. That ordinariness is the secret signal that the outer world is about to catch up. Fear thrives in urgency. Faith thrives in patience. Fear screams, "What if it never happens?" Faith whispers, "It's already done." And over time, you realize the whisper was always stronger than the scream. Faith doesn't shout. It simply is. Living from this state doesn't mean challenges disappear. It means you no longer measure reality by appearances. You know appearances are delayed reflections. You carry the end so firmly that even obstacles become proof of your power, not threats against it. And so desire creates, but only when dressed in faith. Step into the end tonight. Starve fear with disinterest. Feed faith with attention, because the reality you live inwardly cannot help but grow outwardly. And when it does, you'll see. The law of assumption was never waiting on the world. It was always waiting on you. So now the question is, what are you truly feeding, fear or desire? Every thought, every inner scene, every subtle reaction is a seed. Fear thrives when you water it with worry. Desire flourishes when you clothe it with faith. Neville Goddard's teachings remind us, imagination creates reality, and what you assume inwardly hardens into fact outwardly. Pause for a moment and reflect. If fear can manifest so quickly, what could happen if you gave the same consistency, the same emotion to living in the end? What would your life look like if gratitude and quiet joy became your daily state? If this message stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Keep learning, keep applying, keep practicing the law of assumption. And of course, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so every new insight finds you right on time. Your transformation begins not tomorrow, but now.